Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the thing. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Excellent. Yeah, this should be a fun little one. Today we're going to be talking all about Jungle Cruise, the 2021 film with Dwayne Johnson. Why did we pick it? Well, to be honest, Logan picked this like 2 weeks ago and then basically said he couldn't actually do the episode for 2 weeks straight and basically like flaked out earlier today. So it's like, well, at least Frank watched it alongside me. So, so I'm not flying solo again, but yeah, fuck you, Logan. I hope you do watch it, and then I hope you hate it or something, because grr, flake. Originally this was released July 30th, 2021. Other notable releases of the time, we had Black Widow had come out July 9th, Space Jam: A New Legacy, July 16th, Snake Eyes, July 23rd, The Green Knight, which I know Logan also watched, and I think he liked that one, came out alongside this one on July 30th. The Suicide Squad came out a week later on August 5th. Free Guy, which we did a couple weeks ago, was August 13th. And Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings came out September 3rd. Had you seen this one? This was your first time watching it, right, Frank?
Yep, yeah. I missed this one when it was in theaters, and now that it's finally on Disney Plus, it's kind of good to check it out there.
I have a trivia on this later as well. I did not actually watch this in theaters. This was one I watched on on the Disney Premiere Access on Disney Plus, like when it came out, and I believe it was the last film that they did Disney Premiere Access as like that option. It was one I was gonna go see in theaters because I was vaxxed and whatnot at the time. And I don't remember what it was. I went and hung out with my family at some point around this and was like, I was talking with them and I was like, oh yeah, I'm probably going to go see Jungle Cruise. But if you like my dad wanted to see it too, but he wasn't comfortable enough to go back to the theaters. I was like, well, I can get it on my, Disney Plus account if you want. And then you can like watch it there. And that's basically what we ended up doing. Like I basically ended up canceling whatever plans I was going to do to go actually see it in theaters and just was like, I'll just watch it from the comfort of my own home. So yeah, that's what I did.
That was one of those times where it was like worth it when you have like a party of people to watch it, because then it is cheaper than getting like the movie tickets for like 4 or 5 people or
Yeah. Oh, we didn't end up like watching it all together or anything like that. It was just like I ended up buying it. I ended up buying it for myself. And because we had talked about it and I knew my dad wanted to watch it, I was like, hey, you have like my Disney Plus login. Just go ahead and like log in. I think I even I did. I created like an account for him with Dwayne Johnson as the avatar for it to be like, Dad, this is the account you should log into to watch, the Jungle Cruise movie. So yeah, ultimately, yes, we did share it, and I'm sure he probably watched it with my mom or something like that. But yeah, it was we did all watch independently of one another. But yeah, that was the one of the trivia things I had later is that was the last Premiere Access title to date. Other movies like Mulan did that. I think Cruella was one, maybe. What I was like, I bought it, or I also bought it with Raya and the Last Dragon. Was
I remember Black Widow was one because that's the one me and my roommate did.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, has a runtime of 2 hours and 9 minutes, and in the Disney live action timeline of things, you have Flora and Ulysses came out February 19th of 2021. Cruella came out May 28th, 2021, and The Jungle Cruise here at the end of July. The Last Warrior, A Messenger of Darkness, was technically the next live-action Disney animated film, or Disney live-action film, released in December 23rd of 2021. It was a co-production with Russia, so did not like come out here or anything like that, but very interesting seeing that in the context of everything that's going on with Russia and Ukraine right now. Oh, hey, Disney, quit sucking. And quit having like weird partnerships with these kinds of things. And so like So aside from that, Jungle Cruise was the last live action Disney film to date. Obviously, we talked a couple weeks ago about Free Guy, which now exists under the Disney banner, but was technically released as a 20th Century Studios project, not a Disney project. So that's why it is not included in this list. The next upcoming live action movies still to come are Cheaper by the Dozen, featuring Zach Braff, coming out March 18th. So here in like a week or so. And then Better Nate Than Ever, coming out April 1st of 2022. The roll call here. We have director, gonna butcher this probably, and I apologize for that. I believe it is Jaume Colesera, who prior to this had directed films like House of Wax, Orphan, and Unknown. And he and Dwayne Johnson got along well enough on this that basically he got signed on and brought on to work on the Black Adam film that's coming out later this year.
Oh wow.
So that will be
I mean,
Yep.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
After seeing this, that would make me more excited for Black Adam, honestly.
All right, there you go.
Like I thought that this was kind of a good. I thought this was a good movie, and like I thought it was well directed. If anything, there's a lot of really beautiful shots.
Yeah. We have a series of writers on this one. We have Michael Green, who worked on the screenplay here. He started out in TV years and years ago, working on projects like Smallville, Everwood, Heroes, and Kings. He would go on to write for films like Green Lantern, Logan, Blade Runner 2049, Murder on the Orient Express, The Call of the Wild, and after this, he also wrote on Death of the Nile. And I'm realizing that a couple of those I pulled in here just because I was expecting Logan to be on this show, because I know Logan just recently watched Death on the Nile. So again, screw you, Logan, for flaking. We also had the writing duo of Glenn Ficarra and John Requa, who worked on the screenplay as well as the screen story of this. They got their start on the Angry Beavers series back in the Nickelodeon days. They also worked on and wrote Bad Santa, I Love You, Philip Morris, and the film Focus. And they have, according to their IMDb, they have an untitled Joker / Harley Quinn project in the works. So we will see what that turns into. And then these last two feel really out of place and make me think that there was some kind of like Jungle Cruise has been long in the works in somebody's like back, in like the bottom drawer of somebody's desk or something like that, because you have John Norville, who is credited for the screen story, whose literal only other credit is the movie Tin Cup.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And then Josh Goldstein, who's also credited there, is like largely dormant these days, but like worked on projects like Blossom and Sweet Valley High and the Wayans Brothers shows back in like the 90s.
Yeah.
So like there's definitely a part of like in reading through that, I'm like, oh, this definitely seems like something of like, oh, they mapped out like a very rudimentary story, and because of like Writers Guild rules or something like that, they're still credited even though they haven't been attached to this project for 20 years or something like that. But I don't know, that's all speculation on my part. I have no idea what their ultimate influence on the project was, but that's what their IMDb was. Starring, we have, of course, Dwayne Johnson here as Frank. Best known, of course, as like The Rock in WWF/E, getting his start in films with The Scorpion King, and the Fast and Furious, of course, from the Fast and Furious series, films like Moana, Jumanji. After this, he had a starring role in the Red Notice film on Netflix. He was revealed as the Foundation in Fortnite. And coming up later this year, he has two DC films. One, the animated DC League of Super Pets, and then, of course, the aforementioned Black Adam that has been like in development for 15 years itself. Emily Blunt playing the role of Lily Houghton, from projects like The Devil Wears Prada, Edge of Tomorrow / Live Die Repeat, depending on when you ended up seeing that movie is what that depends on what they called it. She was also in Into the Woods, A Quiet Place, Mary Poppins Returns, and last year she actually had like one of the best years of like any celebrity in the box office because of the 1-2 punch of Jungle Cruise and A Quiet Place Part 2. She was like, I think one of the, the easily in the top 10 like stars of Hollywood stuff last year. And up until Spider-Man No Way Home came out, she's probably like number one. And then that one just obviously blew everybody away. But yeah, she had a good 2021, all things considered. Edgar Ramirez playing Aguirre, predominantly I believe a Spanish actor, working on projects in Spain, as are his. I did not pull them in here, but his kind of his like henchmen, I think, are also all predominantly from known from like Spanish television shows and stuff like that. But his projects that did pull up are Vantage Point, Deliver Us from Evil, Point Break, where he played Bodhi in the 2015 Point Break, and then Gold, and he was I forget who he was in American Crime Story, but he was in one of the American Crime Story seasons or something. Jack White here playing McGregor Houghton, British comedian known from projects like Bad Education, the film Mother's Day. After this, earlier this year, he gave his voice to Clifford the Big Red Dog, the animated film of that classic children's story. Jesse Plemons playing Prince Joachim, of course, known from projects like Friday Night Lights. Shout out to Cameron's Friday Night Dying Light series. He was also, of course, in Breaking Bad and the follow-up El Camino movie. He was in a notable episode of Black Mirror. He was very funny in the film Game Night. He was in The Irishman, and then he also had a very kind of like big 2021 because prior to this, he was in Judas and the Black Messiah last year, and he was in this, and then he was eventually in The Power of the Dog, for which he is nominated for an Academy Award currently. So shout out to Jesse Plemons, just, killing it in his fun roles. Paul Giamatti, also a fun little surprise in this movie, playing Nilo, known from projects like Big Fat Liar, which that one I admittedly I did put in there because I figured Frank would be on this episode.
Yeah, I love that movie, and as soon as he came on, I was like, yes.
Yeah. Is also, of course, in Sideways, the John Adams miniseries, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and for the last few years, he was on Billions. And then the last one I pulled in here, Veronica Falcone, playing the role of Trader Sam. She was in the 2020 Perry Mason series, as well as a couple episodes of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and the series Ozark. So shout out to her as well. Some of the trivia we have. It actually ends up working out nicely that it's you on here, because we didn't end up going on Jungle Cruise when we did our recent Disney trip, but I did do Jungle Cruise with you a few years ago when we went to Disneyland as part of like a PSX trip. So of course you, I'm sure, recognize that many of the puns Frank uses in the opening like cruise that he's giving are taken directly from the Disney Parks attraction on which the movie is based. These, quote, "so bad they're good" jokes are one of the reasons why Jungle Cruise skippers are so important to the ride experience. Emily Blunt originally turned down the role of Lily twice due to exhaustion from working on Mary Poppins Returns and A Quiet Place back to back. However, the director flew to New York to meet Blunt and explain why she was wanted for the role. He also brought along a video message from Dwayne Johnson in his producing capacity, pitching the role and wanting to work with her, which Johnson had recorded the night before. That video eventually got her to sign up for the role. The other producers and even Sean Bailey, Disney's head of live production, had previously tried to appeal her for the role but received no response. So Dwayne Johnson basically pulling double duty here as star and producer. Frank describes himself as a skipper. This, of course, is the title given to the Disney cast members who act as tour guides on the Jungle Cruise ride. Famous former skippers include Kevin Costner and John Lasseter. The arrowhead that is kind of essential for the film is discovered by Dr. Albert Falls. This is a reference to a long-running joke on the Jungle Cruise, where skippers describe the famous Schweitzer Falls, named for their discoverer, Dr. Albert Falls. Always an oldie but a goodie. Eagle-eyed viewers will note the clothing that Frank Wolf, aka Dwayne Johnson's character, wears on his boat is extremely similar to what Charlie Allnut, aka Humphrey Bogart, wears in The African Queen. This is intentional, as Bogart's film was a heavy influence on the Jungle Cruise ride at Disneyland. It was also one of Walt Disney's favorite movies, so it is ironic that The African Queen was not a Disney production, but independently produced by United Artists. But in the 1980s, 20th Century Fox acquired the rights, and now the film is owned by Paramount Pictures. So a little bit of history on that. In the vein of The African Queen, a recurring joke of Frank is to use the nickname of Pants at Lily. It addresses not only the social norm that at that time that women shouldn't wear pants, but Katharine Hepburn, one of the stars of The African Queen, was also one of the first women in Hollywood who challenged this convention by wearing pants. And then lastly on that note, Emily Blunt's character is named Lily Houghton. Her last name is not casual, as Katharine Hepburn's full name was Katharine Houghton Hepburn. She's a heavy influence on the movie, of course, again, because she starred in The African Queen, and there are many similarities designed between the two characters. Trader Sam, who again depicted in this film by Veronica Falcone, is typically depicted as a man in the original Disney park attractions, though he does also wear a top hat. But just like shortly before this film opened, Disney actually updated and reopened the Jungle Cruise in Disneyland. Removing some depictions of Africans that had been determined racist. And including the one of my youth was Trader Sam was a headhunter and basically like had shrunken heads and was like one of the last people you see on the cruise before you return to the mainland. And last time I went, yeah, he's definitely no longer in that persona, and now he just has like a little shop. And then yeah, as I said, this was the last Disney Plus Premier Access release to date. So yeah, Frank, what did you think of the Jungle Cruise? We talked a little bit earlier. You said you thought it was pretty good. What'd you think?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed this one, and I was kind of almost surprised a little bit at how much I enjoyed it because I didn't really know what to expect going in, even from just having seen some of the commercials. And I wasn't like extremely excited. I was just like, yeah, I'll throw it on and see what it is. And
Mhm.
then even from the get, I was definitely like, oh, this is fun. Like I thought the action is really good. It's like really well filmed and really well paced. A lot of the cinematography is just beautiful, especially with some of the tropical landscapes.
Mhm.
And there's also, I thought all the actors did like a really good job, even from the guy who's from Friday Night Lights is like kind of the one of the villains, and then even the whole crew of like the Spanish explorers. And then even I really liked Emily Blunt in this movie. Like I thought she was fantastic and probably even like a standout character of the movie.
Mhm.
And I was thinking like the whole time, I was like, I don't think it would work because of their ages necessarily, but I was like, she would make such a good Elena for Uncharted.
Mm.
Like basically just this same character
Yeah.
almost of like the really competent, smart, like blonde kind of like just protagonist. And I
Yeah.
was like, and especially the way she always like fights back against some of the men in the movie, I was like, that could totally be her and Nate when Nate is like telling her not to do something and she's just gonna do it anyways.
Yeah.
Like that like headstrong mentality.
Yeah,
Um
it's definitely fascinating. Given that you and I, of course, recently talked about Uncharted and kind of did our impressions on that, because there's very much like like Uncharted has Jungle Cruise vibes in the same. Like when I saw it, it was very much like, oh, Jungle Cruise has like is very much like reminiscent of The Mummy and
yep.
a little bit of Indiana Jones flavor and stuff like that. And so it was very, like it is that like adventure kind of like B movie kind of thing. So yeah, it's and like Jumanji I think is another one that is getting got thrown around a little bit, of course, because of Dwayne Johnson being connected to both of them and them both taking place in the jungle. um So yeah, I think there is a lot of like fun similarities, and it hits a lot of those same beats and those same kind of character. Like I think the Mummy is maybe the most pronounced one for me because it is, you know, like two people kind of butting heads. You know, the headstrong woman who is kind of like, you know, bucking the trend of society or whatever, there alongside her comedic, you know, counterpart brother, um, and the will they won't they energy between her and kind of the hero character, be it Brendan Fraser or here Dwayne Johnson, and then obviously, of course, even like tying it full circle. The Mummy being what spawned the Scorpion King, so it is almost
Yeah.
like Dwayne Johnson kind of like coming full circle, really. Um, so yeah, I thought I agree. I thought they had like a good energy. I will say, like, because I'd seen it already, a lot of this most recent viewing was kind of the like, this is a great movie to just kind of throw on and have in the background. Most notably, because as I watched it the other night, I basically
Oh, nice.
built built an A wing or a Y wing Lego set here that you can see on the video version of the episode. Because I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna kill two birds with one stone. Gonna knock this thing out. I got it for Christmas from like so the family. I'm gonna watch quote watch Jungle Cruise because I'd seen it like a couple like I watched it a couple times when it came out. Tried to get my money's worth for paying for that premium access kind of or premiere access thing. But this time around, I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of paying attention to what's going on, but I don't really like. It's not you know it's not the most heady movie to really need to like focus your you know deep attention on. So yeah, but yeah, it was like I you know knocked out a 600 piece Lego set kind of while watching this the other night and just kind of like chilling and having a good time with it. Any other general overview thoughts on the film?
No, yeah, but kind of my last thing, I kind of agree with you that it is definitely reminds me of like the Mummy and like movies of kind of that ilk. And it was funny because what I mentioned when we were doing our Uncharted spoiler cast is I was like, oh, I'm happy to have movies like this again, where it's just like these fun action adventure romps with like quips and fun stuff. And I didn't necessarily expect that from this movie, although I probably should have. But like I thought this movie really nailed a lot of that, where it's just a fun ride kind of all the way through.
Yeah. Oh, obviously another, of course, influence being the Pirates of the Caribbean series, not only because of like the adventure aspect, but also like the, you know, like main character has been living a long time or was betrayed and everybody's kind of immortal and weird stuff. But then of course also the, like, oh, also it's another Disney ride movie. Like this is very, that's when I kind of referred to those other writers, it's like, it almost feels like this movie has been sitting in a drawer since Pirates of the Caribbean worked, and they were like, "All right, somebody like give us scripts for all these other rides, and we'll eventually get them made." And this is one that, like, you know, eventually, I think in the trivia I was seeing like has had a hard time actually making its way to theaters or to development until Dwayne Johnson, who had just like enjoys the Jungle Cruise ride, was looking to kind of partner with Disney on a thing, and basically said, "Yeah, I'll go ahead and like foot the, I'll foot the production cost on that, and you know, star in it, and let's have some fun with it." So yeah, it's very much in kind of the vein of those. Any favorite sequences or standout moments or anything that jumped out to you?
Yeah, yeah, there was a couple fun parts that I definitely enjoyed. Right off the back, again, I really kind of enjoyed that opening sequence with Emily Blunt and her brother in kind of the adventure guild kind of deal.
Hmm.
And I like that he's kind of using his status as like a man to distract all the other men in the thing, reading her note cards. And then she just gets to go sneak off and she has like the map on her arm and all that. And like, I really liked some of that. And then even the action scene where she like escapes out the window, I thought was like really fun and really well done. I even like when she like throws the book and it knocks all the swords off the walls and they all like fall around that guy. Like there's just a lot of like fun action pieces that I definitely enjoyed. And I like I said, I thought they did a lot of that like really well.
Hmm.
Um Another one of the favorite things that's kind of right after that is when they introduce The Rock and he's doing his kind of initial Jungle Cruise thing. I was like, man, it literally is the Jungle Cruise ride.
Yep.
Like he's even, I thought it was fun. He's like manipulating it and like cutting ropes and shooting stuff. And then it's like all these different elements of the actual Jungle Cruise ride.
Hmm.
And I thought that was definitely also like a fun nod and like a fun little notion if you've like know the ride and have been on it before.
Yeah, I liked it the first time, and then I think I like it even more a little bit, like knowing like the surprise, the twist of his character of like he was part of the crew and has been there for hundreds of years. So like, on a first viewing, it's like, oh, he's just kind of like, a common huckster. Like this is just his racket, and he's done this trip enough times but like, no, it's like he knows this, like he knows the rivers like the back of his hand, and can just kind of like, not nonchalantly not being paying attention and still know exactly like what needs to happen because of how long he's been doing this or how long he's been there. Ends up being like oh, okay, that's a clever, added little layer to that. And despite that, despite like the fact that he's effectively an immortal character, the fact that he's like spends his time just kind of like as a shill who can barely keep his boat running on on the river, playing like, hoax, doing the like playing up this stuff to all these people, is like that's a, interesting choice for a almost 400-year-old guy, but okay, sure. Yeah. um Touching on that, did that, I guess, twist like catch you off guard, surprise you, or anything, or did you kind of see that coming?
I kind of saw something coming a bit. Like they definitely like feel like they allude to some things and build some things up, even though they don't ever like explicitly kind of like come out and say that till they finally do. But I was like, there's something up with this guy, like especially since he is kind of like you said, he is that guy that's constantly like coming up with all the lies and then trapping them in these weird scenarios, especially even with like the fake headhunter kind
Hmm.
of stuff. But it kind of did catch me off guard a bit because then when the part where the pirate or the Spanish kind of crew is like, oh, Francisco, and they're like, who? And I was like, who is that? And then when I'm like, oh, it's Frank, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And then that's kind of like definitely like a cool little like moment, especially when they unveil some of that.
Yeah.
And then there's even that funny scene of her trying to like take out the sword or like knife from him, and then it's the bit between him and the like lead like headhunter is like, yeah, I've done this for you way too many times. I'm not doing this again.
Yeah. Yeah, like it did surprise me kind of like the first time watching it. I was like, "Oh, okay, that's a clever twist on this." It's, it's weird because I should have known, again, given the like very clear like comparisons to the first Pirates of the Caribbean. Of course, he's also going to like somehow tie into this like, immortal storyline of who these these big bads are and stuff. But the fact that like he was in their crew and he was their navigator, and so the map that Lily brings, like his real interest in that was because he drew it, he made it, and it somehow made its way off to her and stuff like that. It was like, oh, that's a cool way to kind of like tie him in with everything. And then I end up liking that like the explanation for why these people have been just kind of like, like out of the picture for a few hundred years, and why they have like these weird abilities and stuff, is that like he kind of tricked them into being pulled away from the river, and so the jungle took hold of them and kind of morphed their like weird demon abilities and stuff like that. So I ended up surprisingly like being surprised by and enjoying that element, of like, oh, okay, like it, because I think it's something that, apart from that, I was like, okay, this is just kind of like a, almost a carbon copy of the Mummy or something like that. So adding that extra element to his character sets him a little bit apart from Brendan Fraser. It does kind of throw him a little bit more into, Johnny Depp, Captain Jack Sparrow territory and stuff. I don't think he's as like, obviously I don't think he's like as memorable a character as Jack Sparrow is, but I will say, like, to kind of what you brought up earlier, I like, I enjoy him throughout this movie. I enjoy Emily Blunt. Like, I enjoy everybody's like chemistry and stuff like that. Everybody's doing like doing the job that they were brought there to do, of like, let's have fun on this adventure. I will say it didn't like, nothing really like jumps to like a level of like, oh, that like it not to the level of like, when I threw this on for this week, I needed to like be paying attention to and focusing on it. It was just kind of like this is a thing I can throw on in the background. I've already seen this before. I'm fine. This isn't something that's going to be like in regular rotation, I think. In the same way that like, Pirates of the Caribbean was for a little while there when it came out, of like, this is just a fun adventure film. This is like, it's a fine adventure film. I had a good enough time with this. But going back to, I do want to highlight like Paul Giamatti showing up in this. I don't think I had seen him in any of the trailers or anything like prior to seeing this. So when he popped up, I was like, what is he doing in this movie? Like, okay. And what is this character? He's like so over the top and so crazy and campy and stuff. I'm like, okay, he's in a seemingly very different movie from everybody else, but he's having fun with it, and you go nuts, Paul Giamatti. Knock yourself out. What'd you think of him?
The And I liked him in this movie, and like we've talked about, like I like him in definitely a lot of movies, even like Big Fat Liar. He's like such a great like villain character, and
Mhm.
especially one that can be heightened and crazy. But yeah, you are right. He's definitely like super over the top, and I'm just like, I guess at this point, if you called Paul Giamatti to come to your movie, he's just gonna go 110% in
Yeah.
because he's just all the way in.
I mean, it is, and it's I love it, and one of the reasons I pulled in Amazing Spider-Man 2 as like another one of his credits is it's very much like the Rhino energy of he's only in a very small portion of this movie, and he's just going to be completely over the top and make himself a memorable part of this movie. Because he's probably showing up for a few days of filming. He's there, gonna have a good time, and then he's gonna be, off. He's gonna cash those paychecks and just, go on to his next art house indie project or something like that. Um, but yeah, it's very like he just like a surprising little joy to see him pop up in this. Be like, oh, okay. What did you think of Prince Joachim in this? Jesse Plemons.
I liked him too, and I thought he did a really good job as like the villain kind of character, or like one of them. It's kind of cool that I guess he is like the central villain, but it's kind of cool that there's like multiple like antagonistic kind of characters that
Mhm.
all are kind of like working together, but with like almost their own motives at the same time.
Yeah.
And because even I thought Paul Giamatti was going to be like more of a villain than
Right.
he ended up being.
Yeah.
So that's definitely like an interesting thing where he's almost just there for like comedic effect mostly.
Yep. He's just kind of a
Um,
nuisance while they're still back in civilization at the dock, kind of thing. It's and it does like set up the interesting, the fun little like Frank owes me money kind of bit, that allows Frank to kind of like try and pull one over on Lily. Yeah.
A and I did have definitely liked with the, kind of the prince and then, like, his kind of, like, German crew. It's kind of a very interesting, thing where they have, like, the more modern technology, and then he's even, like, playing the, like, phonograph and, like, drinking tea, and, like, it's like and they have this, like, metal submarine that's just going through the river and, like, with the machine guns and everything. It's just so, like it's that, like, tonal difference between, like, the Jungle Cruise and everything else that's happening, and then this, like, more modern thing kind of being brought in.
Hmm.
And it reminded me again, kind of going back to like Uncharted 1, where it's like the submarine in the middle of the forest,
Exactly. Yeah.
like yeah, like it totally reminds me of like that kind of vibe. But like that's kind of interesting to see like how did those guys get there? Like it's
Yeah.
obviously not the same crew, but it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
Um so it's like that. I definitely thought that was cool. And to go back to your kind of, I think Pirates of the Caribbean, like you said, is a great comparison because even when there's that shot of like the Jungle Cruise boat lining up with the submarine, and then the submarine's like shooting at it, and I was like, oh, this totally reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean when it's like the two boats firing at each other.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like that I definitely enjoyed them, and like I also think it's kind of interesting how like they don't overstay their welcome too much. Like I think they definitely kind of focus the movie on like a lot of that main cast for a lot of it, and then
Hmm.
these like the villains just kind of pop in and out at like the right amount almost.
Yeah, I would say, and, like, again, going back to like the Mummy, it is like, oh yeah, you don't see Benny a ton throughout the first Mummy, or not whatever the Mummy character was. Like a lot of what you get in those movies is the adventure that this crew is going on, and their antagonists occasionally pop in to like, they have that like second act fight scene that kind of like throws the heroes for a loop for a bit, and they have to kind of like regroup and figure out, and then realize, oh, they actually know a thing that the bad guys don't, and they're gonna be able to get ahead. um so I think it kind of is playing on a lot of those, those kind of tropes of this genre, but in a fun way. Like when Aguirre and his crew show up, I think in part because like you have like the snake guy and the bee guys with like honey and the like the mud guy and the wood guy, like they all have their thing, and you get to see them use those abilities in a cool fun way, or get like attacked in a, interesting way that you wouldn't necessarily get elsewhere. um or in a, in a way that is again reminiscent of, oh well, these guys can't be killed because they're basically undead, like the Pirates of the Caribbean kind of film. But at least this time, when they, when you throw an axe in them, it gets stuck there because of honey or something like that. um so there's like a little bit of fun to those action scenes that sets them apart from, maybe something else, or a more generic kind of version of those sequences. And I think like the prince character is, I think, just like, I think Jesse Plemons and Paul Giamatti are there in the same movie with each other. Like they're both playing this, 150% type of characters, like over the top. They're gonna, make the most of their screen time and just be a little nuts with it. And Jesse Plemons just kind of be like super, super into doing the little conductor thing to the music and talking to bees or whatever like weird nonsense he's gonna do. And then just relish when he does have scenes with other people, like, it's Joaquim, and like, oh, you told them my name and now I have to kill these people, kind of thing. Like, he's he straddles that line of like just over the top silly, but also with a menace and with a bite to him. And so I think there's some fun to be had there. And then, when he goes out at the end of a movie with a giant thing just kind of crushing him, it's like, okay, yep, that checks out. Sounds good. um
That's what he gets for crushing the guy at the beginning of the movie who knew his
yeah.
name, because he like shot the rope and it crushed
Oh,
that guy. So I'm like, it comes full circle.
yep, there you go. Yeah, I also will say, like, I liked the end of the movie, kind of the climactic stuff there. I liked Frank's kind of like plan to basically like, I know how to stop these guys. I need to trap them in the river, or trap them from being able to get pulled back into the river. I'm gonna have to do it and take myself out of the equation too this time, but so be it. Um, and so I like him basically doing almost that suicide run to kind of blow the dam or whatever, and deal with it. But then of course, as is expected in these movies, Lily gives up the miracle cure for miracle cures just to save this one guy, and take him back to England. But yeah, it's a fun enough movie, a good enough time. Any other standout bits or sequences that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, we talked about it a bit, but one thing I did want to give a shout out to is Aguirre and his kind of crew. I thought they were like super badass. Like I
Mhm.
thought they all had super cool designs and like interesting powers, and kind of even like you mentioned, like not only do they get used in cool ways, it's like they're all visually distinct, and you could kind of tell like, okay, this is the bee guy, this is the wax guy, this is like the mud guy. And like then it's so they do such interesting like combat and like cool things with them. Like even when he takes the musket and he shoots the bee guy
Mhm.
and he gets hit in the head, and then it just comes out in like full of like honey.
Yeah.
And like I thought they were so cool, and even some of those effects, besides the fact that they were like cool designs, I was like, I almost didn't expect this in like a PG-13 movie, especially because like the snake guy, his face explodes into snakes at one point,
Yeah.
and I was like, whoa, this would like freak little kids out, I assume.
Yeah,
Like,
he
but
definitely has a couple of jump scares. Like, I mean, the first time we see him, like that snake just pops out of the rock and basically like kills one of the prince's guys. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought, that I thought all that was super cool, and, then even, like, when they do that whole flashback sequence, like, explaining The Rock and kinda his history, I also liked a lot of that too, because it is kinda that interesting thing where he's like, "Yeah, for, like, 100 years, they just hunted me down and, like, killed me all the time, and I got tired of it,
Mhm.
so I trapped them in, like, a cave," and that's like, "Oh, that's cool," because I never even, like it kinda shows you at the beginning of the movie that they got, like, trapped and, like, pulled in, and then but it just kinda like, "Oh, they were cursed."
Yeah.
And I was like, so I like that it kind of gives you the full explanation of everything. And then I even liked the take on it too, where like The Rock was then just kind of outliving, and he's like, he kind of explains, he's like, yeah, I built the town.
Yeah.
Like I built the town, and he's like, I made some friends, lost some friends. Like it kind of really goes into that little thing of him being immortal in this town. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, that's so crazy, and it's such an interesting little thing to kind of like play around with.
Yeah. It definitely like it opens up that can of worms of like, okay, well, like people like every generation of people know that you haven't been aging. You're not like so how does that like obviously you've confided I guess enough with Trader Sam and her people that like you're immortal and you know sometimes you're just going to get stabbed and you know almost die and stuff like that. But like the like does Nilo just not has Nilo just not caught on that Frank is immortal and looks exactly the same as when Nilo arrived, you know, 15 years ago or something? Like there's that weird element, but I did appreciate that. Like, yeah, okay, like he set up shop there and kind of like and yeah, like built you know a little bit of a town, kind of created this little homestead for other people to kind of join him, and I like that. I also like the Proxima and the next
Yeah.
and the next and the next kind of like the series of Proximas, the little montage that we get of kind of like that little thing. Because again, I think that's also a fun little element of his like con man kind of vibe is like I like that first fight that he has with the cheetah. I'm like, okay, like somehow he has trained this cat to be in on it or whatever. Like that with everything we know about this character so far, that's the thing that makes the most sense to me in this moment. Not that he's like, you know, just some kind of like miracle, you know, person or whatever that is dealing with this. Like I feel like that he somehow has this cat in on it. Doesn't make sense that that's like a thing that he has done, but sure, we'll go along with it for the movie. So like when we later, like when the reveal happens, and we later see Proxima on the boat or whatever, I'm not surprised by that at all. But yeah, still a fun little like relationship that he has that kind of probably helps keep him sane a little bit. Um, any other highlights?
I think that it might be it mostly for me. Like, there's definitely, I think we kind of covered pretty much everything. But yeah, like I definitely just enjoyed the movie a lot, especially just for more than I would have thought. And it's just like a fun kind of action adventure, totally reminiscent of like Uncharted, kind of
Hmm.
like we were talking about. But like, I'm happy, kind of like I said before, I'm kind of happy that we're just kind of getting more movies like this again, all of a sudden out of the blue. Somebody was like, why did we stop doing Mummy and National Treasure
Yeah.
and like Indiana Jones? Like, why did we just stop doing those?
Yeah. Yep. Good fun times all around here. Well, that is gonna do it. So let's go ahead and hop into the report card. Grade it from A plus to F. What do you want to give Jungle Cruise here, Frank?
I think for me, this one I'm gonna go with an A. Like,
Okay.
this was just like a surprisingly fun time that I probably even recommend to other people to check out. So I mean, I definitely like, again, I was just surprised at like the quality of like how much enjoyable it was.
Awesome. Very cool. It's probably a B for me.
Mm.
But like it's I mean, it's a solid. I think again, like when I initially saw it and was just kind of comparing it to, yet like, yeah, it does. It's like The Mummy plus Pirates of the Caribbean plus this plus it's like all of these things, and it's like doing the same kind of thing, but it doesn't have like the you know the maybe the luster of each of those things. Like it doesn't have like The Mummy. Even going back and like watching that like now, there's just something about the chemistry and the ideas and the fun of that one that I think this one's missing a little bit of. This one feels almost a little bit too formulaic and too like kind of studio driven to have maybe that like extra little flavor of magic for me, at least. Like still a good fun time, definitely like achieves what it's setting out to do, but it like doesn't feel like it really excels in any particular place for me at least. So
I
yeah, I
I
think it's
even
a B.
I even kind of I even kind of get that too, though, because like there's not too many moments that I would think, oh, that's hilarious, or like, oh, that's like a standout necessarily moment. But there's a lot through it where I'm like, that's funny,
Hmm.
like that's fun, that's a good action, that's good cinematography. Like I think it does everything like really well, but I think it's fair to be like, well, it doesn't do anything like amazing or stand out. It's kind of on that line,
Yeah.
especially because it's a good point there where it's very reminiscent of so many other things we have seen.
Yeah, I think I also like I as much as I like Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt, I don't think they have like significant chemistry as like romantic chemistry. I like them constantly butting heads with each other through the movie and constantly like giving each other crap. So when they kind of do the like, well, we're gonna do the formulaic, like they start to fall for each other at the end. It's kind of like, okay, but like you also didn't have to do that. You could have just let them like enjoy their friendship at the end of this, and let them kind of go off in their separate paths or find their kind of separate things. Because then you also get into this weird like, oh, he's like 450 years old. That's way too old for her. Kind of like extra. It's the was that the basically the Twilight issue of like
Yep.
there's a way too significant age gap there between those two characters. So like I think if the movie had like thrown a little curveball of like not trying to shoehorn in the little romance there, and it had just been like she's just going to be an adventurer who does not need a man and can just kind of exist in and of herself, and not that she needs a man or anything like that, but like if they just hadn't forced in this like little romance subplot, I think I might have enjoyed it better a little bit of like, okay, that's something that this does that those other ones didn't do. Like it actually tries to do something unique in its own regard, but it doesn't. It kind of just it hits all it like it is the like they had a whole bunch of check boxes of like
Yep.
these are the things you see in these kinds of movies, and they just kind of go through and tick them all off one by one. And not bad, just in a very serviceable way. So yeah, I think a steady B for me.
I kind of
Yeah.
agree with you on that, on the romance plot too, though, before we wrap up, just because like from the get, I knew like, oh yeah, they're going to get together. And it's
Mhm.
such an obvious, like, oh yeah, that's going to happen. So when it happens, I almost just kind of wrote it off and didn't think about it. But honestly, I'm totally with you where if they didn't go that direction and she was just kind of more in her own independent way and they kind of have that like platonic friendship where they butt heads the whole time, like, I think that would have definitely been probably the stronger move
Mhm.
for me at least.
Yeah. Well, cool. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. You can go catch Race to Witch Mountain, which is another Dwayne Johnson film over on Disney Plus, as is Journey to the Center of the Earth. Then you can get into Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. I don't know why that's the one they pull and have like as
Yeah.
the recommendation. I don't know why it's not just the first one, Curse of the Black Pearl, but whatever. They also have Avatar as a recommendation here, The Haunted Mansion. So basically, all of the Disney theme park rides. Even though admittedly the Avatar ride came after the film, but um, in the vein that you kind of alluded to, National Treasure is another one. Night at the Museum and The Jungle Book. Those are the like official, like the formal 8 suggestions that I had. But I also will shout out, especially as kind of a little plug for next week's episode, the Behind the Attraction series. The first episode of Behind the Attraction was a Jungle Cruise episode, and it was like timed to come out right at the same time as this. Is basically like hey, like here's the behind the scenes of the Jungle Cruise ride, and they had like Dwayne Johnson, because Dwayne Johnson also produced the Behind the Attraction series. So at least that first episode is in particular an interesting little tie-in. And again, kind of teasing for next week's Disney Plus show, or that D Plus show. The last couple of trips I've done to Disneyland, I've basically been like, well, I'm not going to be here to record like a regular episode, so I'll just kind of like record these in the can. So we have Behind the Attraction Part 1, which was those like first 3 episodes. Behind the Attraction Part 2, which went live when all of us went and did our Disney trip together as kind of a little crew. So next week will be Part 3, which is effectively going to be episodes 7 through 10 of Behind the Attraction. So the last few episodes. So yeah, you can go check out that next week. I think I've already sat down. Did I already sit down? I already started to do the doc on them. I think I need to sit down and actually still watch them and basically record that this weekend. But it's all a blur. I've got a whole bunch of stuff like already pre-recorded, and I just forget what I've already got pre-recorded for when I'm out next week. But yeah, check that out either on Disney Plus, or check out next week's That D Plus show for Part 3 of our Behind the Attraction series. Extracurriculars. You watching anything else on Disney Plus there, Frank?
Not really at the moment, but I know, like, just to give a shout out to what is upcoming,
Mhm.
very excited for Obi-Wan.
There
The
you go.
trailer just dropped this week. It
Yep.
was very incredible, very hyped now, and I'm also very excited for Moon Knight, as I've mentioned before.
There you go. Yeah. For me, I've started watching, and I saw it in theaters, so this is kind of more like rewatching as well. I started watching West Side Story, which we will be doing a D plus show in 2 weeks' time. So you can come back and check that out as well at the time. And then I also am very excited for the Obi-Wan series when that comes out. When I saw that trailer, I dropped it on our Slack and was like, so because they're tying this in with the like 45th anniversary of Star Wars, this is going to come out on a Friday, which means that week's episode of that D Plus show will probably be delayed by a day, so we can watch it and then record, and then I'll just upload it the next morning. So heads up to our audience that end of May episode will probably be a day late, but that'll be why. But yeah, very cool. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Frank, for actually watching the movie, unlike, again, Logan, who flaked, and joining me for this. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to one of our other podcasts, That Nerdy Site Show. The most recent episode at the time you're probably listening to this is our Batman spoiler cast, which is you and Cam talking about the Batman.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a good, fun episode, and there's some spoiler-free thoughts in there if you haven't seen it yet. So that's the part I checked out. I still haven't seen it yet, so but I trust the rest of the episode is good.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, definitely check that out. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will give a shout out to our Let's Plays every Tuesday and Thursday that go up on the YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. This week's episodes were Nintendo Switch centric. I booted up my Switch for the first time in quite a while because of Triangle Strategy that came out, and so while I had it booted up, I also recorded a Let's Play of the upcoming Kirby game because they threw a demo of that on the Switch. So go catch that for this week, and then next week's episode, in honor of my impending Disney trip, are going to be a couple of episodes on the game Planet Coaster. So you can go check that out. That was a PlayStation Plus game a month or two back, so I picked it up and was like, yeah, this is fun, and will tie into effectively a mini theme of next week of like Disneyland / theme park stuff. So yeah, go check out all that fun stuff. You find everything and all the latest from us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.